Do you think it was because of that outage today?
You can see.
Beats me. I wouldn't know.
Something big happened with them. I'm not sure if it was yesterday or the day before as well. Like a major, like everything was out for like an hour.
Yesterday.
Yesterday, okay.
Did they get hacked by the Russians, like the Pentagon?
I don't know. I'll try to see if I have that close by, but
It's pretty nasty stuff going on there.
Here in the chat. So, like it's rare that you get to see red dots lining up for every single service.
Wow, yeah, that's crazy. Okay, let's get rolling.
I didn't watch yesterday. That was.
Are you talking to Sarah? Is my account?
Your friend's not at home. It's asking if your friend's home.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Dad.
You may want to
You guys don't forget to mute if you're talking.
at the same time.
They're going to talk to your friend.
Are you not on yet?
Found it. Okay. So anyway, thanks to everyone for coming out. I've got a couple things to talk about to begin, and if anybody else wants to chime in, then that would be great. Don't forget to unmute yourself before talking, and don't forget to mute yourself, I guess, when you're not talking, if you're in an environment where it would make more sense to be muted. Before we get started with Robert and Henry, let's just talk a little bit about what's going on out in the world. First of all, FileMaker 19.2 was released. Oh wait, was it released?
Not yet.
14th, yeah. So it was released yesterday. And anybody want to chime in with anything interesting having to do with, oh, they didn't release it in the end. Oh, I'm sorry. Turns out they didn't release it. They were going to release it. Sorry, never mind. I guess we'll talk about that next meeting. What else? Well, CentOS is dead.
What?
Yes. But let's. I'm giving you the clickbait headline. The bottom line is that CentOS 7 is still going to, which is what FileMaker, the version of CentOS that FileMaker is using, is going to be around until 2024. CentOS 8, though, is dead effective, like pretty much now, like over the next couple of months or so. They're shifting to CentOS Stream, which is like a rolling update, a continuous release for their for Red Hat's Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So anyway, that's interesting and kind of I don't think it's anything to worry about. There's 4 years of support left for it, And in that time, I'm sure FileMaker will be able to adapt to another version of Linux if they need to. Does anybody have anything they want to add to that?
Well, it's already the mindset they're into for their own product, so I can hardly see how they would say it's a bad thing for the OS to be rolled out this way. And aside from that, I mean, we'll see where things go.
Yeah, I agree. That evergreen type of deployment, that's what all browsers have switched to, well, except for Explorer. All browsers have switched to that already. And that's, you know, that's kind of the way of that kind of software, I think.
Yeah, but I think that a distinction needs to or should be made between the type of software that you that an organization relies on, which benefits from having a waterfall release over sort of rolling updates like you have for a web browser, because there are types of software, there are situations in which you need to be absolutely certain that everything is going to work, and you don't want to ever want to be on the bleeding edge. And in fact, this new rolling release of CentOS 8, CentOS Stream, is designed to serve Red Hat Enterprise Linux in the myriad different forms that it's available prior to any version actually being certified and put into production. So they have, and it's actually really interesting. I'm going to put in the notes the CentOS blog where they talk about how there's a blog post called How RHEL, that's Red Hat Enterprise Linux, is made. And they talk about the different streams that have to come together and the different types of certification that are necessary before they actually roll out the enterprise version of Linux. And it's quite interesting, and it really gives you a sense of all the different types of things that you need to be paying attention to when you're rolling out an operating system. And the bottom line is all of it is to ensure that this enterprise system is totally rock solid before they put it out there. And so it's sort of the opposite of a rolling release. It really is a waterfall release, just because huge, big organizations, banks, rely on it, and it needs to be rock solid. Anyway, it's kind of like, I don't know, what do you guys think about FileMaker having rolling releases?
Great if it doesn't break anything.
Well, you know, Doug, I remember a lot of conversations 15, 20 years ago about, there's a lot of frustration, I remember on Tech Talk and stuff, about how we felt that the deployment was too slow for updates, and a lot of like minor bugs needed to be fixed and that weren't being paid attention to. And I feel like FileMaker and or Claris, I should say, is sort of paying more attention to that sort of frustration, like for us developers. It's less and less about marketing to, you know, the guys in the, I didn't think of the, you know, the Top Knot guy, that whole marketing thing that they did. They seem to be focusing more on the developers as their source of like their bread and butter, basically. And so the whole idea of like quick fixes and stuff, I think it makes us better suited to like I think it'll, oh boy, I'm start tripping over this, but the just being able to quickly fix bugs, I guess, is going to be a benefit to us, as long as, like you say, they you know, it's well tested prior to deployment and stuff. I mean, we don't want to mess with people's data and stuff like that, and we don't want to force updates on people either. But I think that having rolling bug fixes and stuff is beneficial to all of us.
Yeah, I think that that's the side of it that's non-controversial. Fixing bugs as you go and having more frequent releases. The controversial side of it is coming out with new features, rolling them out on the fly. Like things you can get stuck in difficult situations, like a new feature gets rolled out, and the only way that you can get that bug fix that you really need is if you also accept that new feature, and that's a tough one.
It's been an issue for other software, like that uses the rolling deployment like that, like Adobe or. I'm thinking there have been releases of FileMaker that were almost destructive, like what was it, FileMaker 15 or 16, where entire scripts and value lists were disappearing under really bizarre, rare circumstances, but enough to cause panic. Like,
Yeah, I think those
what
are
others?
bugs. You're going to get that in any whether.
No, that's what I'm saying. So they seem to have mastered the bug fixing before deployment. We haven't had an issue like that since. I think they've been really careful. So I understand the concern, but has it played out as being a real problem in other industries that have this sort of deployment that have equally critical mission critical data or whatever?
Typically, it's the opposite. It's actually much more stable. The faster you can push out a change, the diff between version A and version 8.1 software is smaller, and there's statistically less bugs in it.
Yeah,
because
so
just that much. The longer you wait between deployments, the greater the chance of bugs because you've done that much more development.
I think what I was trying to say and what I was tripping over earlier is that I really feel that over the years, Claris has become more and more in line with what industry people do, like how it works, and industries like test or time-proven techniques to deploy software and update bugs and fix bugs and everything else. So I'm for it. I like the direction that Claris is going in these days.
I like what Charles just said, and also I think on last month when Wim was on, I said something about the way I see the products right now is a bit different than what I used to, especially with server, because I think that with server, Claris is able to have a whole lot more monitoring in terms of the impact of their own changes, because they rolled it out for their own cloud, whereas for the Pro product, it's not the case, So I think there are things that on the server, if something bad happens, they can say oops and then roll it back. Whereas if the same thing was to happen with the Pro product, it could take more time for that to get to their ears, basically.
So let's talk for a minute about Apple Silicon and the M1 chip. FileMaker 19.1.3 is fully compatible with the M1 running under Rosetta 2. According to FileMaker, at least it's been certified to run under Rosetta 2. But as always, I don't think it's a great idea to just jump over there. I think it's always best to wait and find out whether any problems emerge. But, and I don't think any have emerged so far. As of at least a couple of days ago, when I was looking at it, there was nothing out there there were no problems out there. If you know differently, then speak up. But I think the biggest concern is people will have clients that go out and buy new machines and have no choice but to be running Big Sur and on their M1 Max. So, you might get forced there sooner than later. FileMaker 19 is certified to run, but no earlier versions of FileMaker are certified to run. So that's another important thing to keep in mind. And it's tough to explain to your clients when they've gone out and bought an expensive new computer that they can't use, or at least that they're not supported in using the software that they want to use. So it's something to think about, and I'll put a link in the notes after the meeting about this. Anyone have anything they want to add?
Just
But then
go ahead.
sorry, go on, Henry.
One detail I read about the M1, the current M1 chips, is that they cannot handle any more than 16 gigs of RAM. So they're holding off for the big MacBook Pro and iMacs until they have a new generation of the M1 that'll handle more RAM.
Yeah, in the real world, in my experience, that doesn't really mean anything for FileMaker, from a FileMaker standpoint.
Right, but if you're buying it not just for FileMaker, but for web browsing, like web browsers can take an awful lot of RAM in Catalina, you know, and you know, maybe they work out those bugs as time goes by. But I had a client who he had 16 gigs of RAM, I think, and it wasn't enough when he was having all the.
What was he using? Chrome?
Chrome and Firefox and Safari. Like,
Is he downloading like a lot of high resolution photos or something?
No, but he had lots of apps open.
Wow. Anyone have anything else you want to add there? Has anybody heard about using other versions of FileMaker under Rosetta 2?
I have not. But again, to your comment, Doug, when you say like they buy this machine and then they can't run the software they want with it. I mean, Claris is only going to support 19 and 18 at this point in time. So what is it that they'd want to run? Because if the point is that they have a license of 18 but not 19, then I guess they should just keep their licensing current.
Yeah, it's hard though. I mean, one person goes and buys a new machine, and then because FileMaker doesn't only supports the last 2 versions, that and they can have a whole bunch of other old machines that are running an old version of FileMaker, and now they can only run the current version of FileMaker on their new machine, but everybody else is on FileMaker 14, and suddenly you've got like all kinds of trouble.
Yeah, well, you can have that even without Big Sur. You know, I have a customer who I think their server is on server 15, and they have both Mac and PCs. And I had to tell them, you know, I can see a time where I'm not going to be able to support you anymore if I change my hardware. So, and for themselves, they're also in that space where if they start changing one thing, then it means pretty much a whole lot of the different workstations also need to be considered as well.
Yep, definitely. So folks, let's unless anyone's got anything that they're dying to get out there, we will move on.
Yeah, actually, I did just want to mention, Doug, that the other thing about the M1 is especially if you're a developer, you cannot run a virtual machine with an older operating system, so that you could run like FileMaker-11, for example, if you're moving clients forward. So you'll have to keep another machine for that. You also can't run Windows right now on one of those machines. Right,
and so there's a real chance that you won't ever be able to run like Intel Windows. Don't forget, there's also ARM Windows. There might be more of a chance that you'd be able to run that. We don't know, because like VMware and Parallels are not really saying what they're doing. At least I know VMware is saying, well, we're looking at it, we're seeing what we can do. I don't know actually what Parallels is saying. I just know they haven't come out with anything. It's a non-trivial task, because you have to emulate all those the Intel instructions of the Intel chip.
I have a question about Parallels. They have a tool that will allow you to import from an existing PC if you're trying to install Windows in Parallels. Is there a similar tool to be able to grab an existing Mac? Like say you have an external Mac computer and you want to grab the OS from that and put it into not just the OS, but the whole drive. Do you know if there's a tool for that?
I don't know.
I'm not sure what you're asking exactly.
Well, like for instance, I'm still running Sierra on my MacBook Pro 15-inch because I actually have a client who has their own FileMaker Server 11, and I need to help them out sometimes. So I can run 11 and 12 and
well, here's what you
everything on Sierra. But I want to go up to Mojave or Catalina, so I'm thinking of putting in a 2 terabyte stick in my laptop and then installing Parallels and then running a bunch of Mac OSs inside that, or at least Sierra inside of Parallels.
I think you can just install Sierra fresh, and then the first time you boot it, it's just like a new machine, right? It'll ask you if you want to transfer data from another Mac, I think.
Okay, that's good. Thanks.
You might want to bring all your stuff over to that new machine. Like especially if you're just going to run FileMaker on it, maybe just install FileMaker once you've got the OS on. I don't know.
Installing FileMaker from scratch in FileMaker 11 is probably not possible in Sierra. I think you might have to install it in Lion and then do updates and that sort of thing. But I'll figure it out, I guess.
So the bottom line is you can run earlier versions of the Mac OS in VM, and works really well. But that's on the Intel hardware.
Right. Dan just posted an interesting thing saying that you can run FileMaker 5 to 19. Is that what you said on a Windows box, Dan?
He's saying now maybe 6, and you know what? Yeah, you can. You for sure can. It is amazing. He's saying on Windows 10. I didn't know Windows 10. I knew that Windows 7 you could, but he's probably right.
Yeah. Henry, your only limitation would be if there's any custom Apple script in your client stuff, then you might have a problem.
Good to know. I just picked up a Windows box, an HP mini tower, bigger than a Mac Mini, but pretty small. $220, including Windows 10 Pro, and 8 gigs of RAM, and not DVI ports, but DisplayPort and VGA and USB 3, 4 ports. Pretty damn good for $220 from Amazon.
Yeah. Okay, let's get rolling then with Robert talking about. That's correct, Robert first, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Talking about readable code.
All right. Let's see if I can share my screen, or you have to allow for that first. It looks like you have to allow for it first.
I'm allowing for it. There you go.
Here we go. Right. So we should all be able to see my screen. I'm gonna minimize the pictures there, and all right. First thing I want to say, I've done this presentation in the past, and it's been mostly with groups where I don't know people that much, and not to say that I'm necessarily in a situation where I've been having dinner with everyone around here, but there's people here whom I know and I esteem very well. So it's in terms of looking at the list of names, I feel like it's the most intimidating setup I've had to date. Or my presentation today is about how to make her code more readable. I think it's really a concern that we should keep in mind all the time and keep revisiting. And at the same time, if we think of the more recent topics about add-ons and Linux and whatnot, this is more in a back to basics kind of a setup than compared to other things that have been flying around recently. So I think I hope you're going to like the content, but in terms of expectations, I would say feel free to interrupt, because I think that's where, with a group like this, we would be getting the most from your reactions and your interactions to what will be shown today. All right. So quick slide about myself. For those who don't know me, I'm Robert Naud. I'm a father who sings choir, although not recently. It's been a little while since I've been in a choir right now, and I like to code with Claire's FileMaker, and I'm gonna try to convince you that being lazy can be a good thing. So I've been doing FileMaker consulting since 2005, and I started my company Accolade Plus Accolade in 2019. The tagline for that company is communication is everything and everything is communication. And that applies to code also. And we'll see about it in our topic today. So main objective, quite simply trying to push comments down our list of tools we use when we're thinking of code readability. I think comments are great, but they're also one of the biggest threats to making our code more readable. It's easy to rely on and actually too easy to rely on comments. So I'm not against them. I just believe there are some reflexes we have that we need to fight off. Our agenda today is going to be focusing on why we should care about this, because oftentimes it's easy to just say, yeah, well, of course we want our code to be readable. Who wants their code to be unreadable? No one, you know. But we looking into like what are the ramifications for everything can give a good perspective on this. So we'll chat a bit about naming. We'll look into some more tools and discuss for comments, if we are to use them, then how and when we should use them. I'm going to be sharing a couple gadgets that I like to keep around, and then parting notes and discussion as time allows. So just a quick note to say what I'll be sharing today is something that is very subjective. I'm very curious about what everyone can throw into the mix. There are things where there's no right and wrong answer. There's just preferences. And some of what is shown is, of course, based on my own practice and is always changing. So I'm looking forward to see what it is I can take away from this presentation today and put into my own coding habits. So all of it is derived from things that have been shared in the community. It can be hard for me to give proper attribution for one thing or another, and nothing is set and forgetting. And I've been borrowing from Jerry Robbins' 2014 DevCon presentation. It's a topic that is I'd say that the concepts are long lasting. So, and lastly, I hope you like quotes. And with that, here is one. So all relationships are based on trust. Customers, employees, partners, where we eat, what we eat. It applies to code also. How can we trust something we do not understand? How are we going to understand it if reading from it is not making that easy? So why should we care? And just in case I wasn't clear about using quotes, here's one more. Martin Fowler says, any fool can write code that a computer can understand, but good programmers write code that humans can understand. In other words, our job isn't just to make stuff work, but to make sure that things will make sense. And that is very different from one another. Jessica here says, one man's crappy software is another man's full-time job. And that full-time job is not a fun one. No one wants that type of job security. So back to why we should care. Well, of course, we should care for others. It's the nice thing to do to make sure that as we are coding, that whoever would be following us, they would not have too much of a hard time. Code is alive, and as people will put their hands in there, we want them to not feel like they're gonna hate us to their gut. So. But also for ourselves, because more often than not, the next guy is not someone else. It's just you, like a year later, 6 months later, 2 weeks later, depends. So and again, we don't want to rely on our memory for that kind of stuff. We want to be looking at what's there and know that. From what we see in the code, then we can feel good about it. So what happens when code cannot be trusted or understood? Well, a couple of things. With maintenance and updates, I'd rather not touch it. It's not really the path to code that is well maintained. Let's put it this way. It's more like, well, I don't want to break anything, and let's see everything I could do, all the workarounds that I'll put in place so that I don't have to touch this one thing, that black box that I don't want to be involved with. Is it working? I don't know. Maybe. Doesn't sound too reassuring. And there's not single tone I can think of that would make the same sentence sound more reassuring. It's just not the answer we want coming from anyone, and not just code, just anything. If I hand out a blueprint to a construction worker and says, "Hey, can you build this?" and he starts flipping it around and making faces, I'm not sure I want to build my house with someone like that. So we have to think about all that. And next is the IKEA effect. So basically, there's code that could just work perfectly fine and still fall victim to not being understood or being trusted. So what is it we do then? Well, we do what we do all the time. We just say, okay, this goes to the trash, and then we'll rewrite it, because what we rewrite, we're completely familiar with it. It's just we jump to that conclusion, skipping over the fact that it's going to be harder than we think, and we have to do all the testing and debugging that goes with that. And again, notice that in the text here, I'm talking about code that can work perfectly. I'm not saying that it is good code, because good code is something that we trust. Okay, it is trust-based. So another good way for code to lose trust is when comments are inconsistent with what the code does. So comments can be a lot of maintenance, and maintenance for someone who's lazy like me, I mean, I don't want to have to do more maintenance than I'm supposed to do. So let's keep the maintenance as low as possible. the IKEA effect is just not a funny word. It's actually, it exists. It's documented. If you look it up on Wikipedia, it has its own page, you know, and it says that we tend to place more value in things that we were involved in putting together. So in the case of IKEA, it's really for furniture. So I guess we end up paying more for things that we have to assemble. Sounds a bit crazy to me, but for code, it says because we built it, we're going to be more attached to it. We're gonna say that it has more value than it really has. So I can understand that there's a bias there coming into play. There's also two other effects that I want to bring to our attention. One is the mere exposure effect. So that's one where we tend to develop a preference for things that are familiar to us, and that's completely understandable. If I get to choose into a sort of solution that relies on code that I'm familiar with, or code that I really know nothing about, chances are I'm going to choose the solution where I'm familiar with the code, because if I need to dig in to go in there, then I'll know my way around. And with the one where I'm unfamiliar, it's just I'll be rolling the die and say, well, maybe it's the way I expect, or maybe it's going to be a labyrinth. I don't know. And lastly, the other effect that comes into play is the Dunning-Kruger effect, and that's what comes into play when we're trying to guess how hard something is. So basically, we're always underestimating how hard something is, unless we are completely familiar with the topic. If we're an expert in that sphere, then chances are your estimate will be accurate. But if you are not an expert, then your estimate is going to be off, and more likely than not, it's going to be off and will not be favoring you. And that is something that clearly applied to me when I figured, yeah, I can put together a presentation on code readability. You know, it's going to be done in 15 minutes. Not 15, but let's just say it took me more time than what I had initially planned. So two things here that I want to outline. Robert C. Martin says, we spend way more time reading code than writing code. He says that for each hour we spend writing code, we're going to spend 10 hours reading code. So, and that means by extension that if we spend 10 hours writing code, then we're going to spend roughly 100 hours reading code. And that's a chunk of time. So if we think that making sure code is readable is just, yeah, let's do it because who wants code to be unreadable? Well, when we get to those kind of numbers, it's convincing. So also on the same slide on the right, I had to realize for just about any other language that is not programming language, when we learn, say, Spanish, you're going to go into a class and then you're going to be taught Spanish and see, okay, here's the shape, the grammar, and so on. But no one out of that class is going to say, okay, now go and write a novel. They're going to say, okay, now go and here's a book for you to read, or here's a movie to watch, or go and chat with people or something, you know. But somehow with programming languages, we go in a class, we learn the syntax and everything, and then off you go, start writing stuff, you know. So that's something that just feels a bit crazy. So anyway, if you think you don't need to make your code readable because no one else ever looks at it, make sure you're not confusing cause and effect. That is food for thought. So now into naming and why obsessing is a good thing. And I want to remind you that if there's anything that I've said that you want to interject, interrupt, and go on, shoot, and we'll be chatting on this. So Phil here says there's only two hard things in computer science: cache invalidation and naming things. Now, I know nothing about cache invalidation, and I'm sure it's a nightmare. But for naming things, I have to really agree, meaning it looks deceptively simple, but it's not obvious. It's not like it's screaming at you, hey, here's the name that it should have every single time. And naming actually is our most powerful tool. It is what we can use to be understood. If we are designers, then naming shows our intent and it tells a story. So how should we go about naming? First, I would say let's be good parents. And that means FileMaker makes it easy, I would say, for us to rename stuff. But I'm not sure that I would consider that a feature. I'm sorry? I'm not sure I would consider that a feature as much as I used to, because basically, if we rename something, to me, it acknowledges that we picked the wrong name to start with, and we should have spent more time thinking about what the right name was when we first created that thing. And if we think to ourselves, yeah, but I'll get to rename it later. Well, first thing is, later, chances are, is going to be much later than you envision. And second is, it's just a bad habit. I would say, like, would you rename your own child once he gets 5-year-old? Would you say, hey, Dan, happy birthday, you're 5-year-old now. We're going to call you Fred because Dan is really crappy and Fred is so much better. No one would do that. So same thing goes for the rest of everything we deal with in FileMaker. Now, renaming can break things, okay? Where we're not in that space anymore, where there's only FileMaker and nothing else. We're having things that are called with FMP-URL, API, OData, you name it. Basically, there's a bunch of things where if you are just renaming your stuff, then something somewhere is likely to fail on you, and you're not going to get warnings or anything. Your things are going to get renamed, but then stuff will break. So let's make sure that we make things in a way where we're less likely, or we won't have to rename them too often. The good news is we name stuff all the time, and there's a bunch of things that we get to choose the name of. Custom functions, all the tables and fields, occurrences, layout scripts. There's a great deal of latitude. We have layout objects and so on. So if we just start paying attention to what we're actually doing, we're bound to improve. So that's the good news. Now, how not to name stuff. I would say a name is not an abbreviation. Okay, abbreviations are something I want us to stay away from. I mean, and whenever I come across an abbreviation, I'm like, okay, I have to guess again based on context what it is that the other developer was thinking. And basically, it's not obvious. It's difficult. If we just ask for a full word, 5 different people, how would you abbreviate this word? Chances are they're going to come up with different answers. Now flip the game around, take the abbreviation and ask them to say, okay, what's the word that stands behind that abbreviation? And the answers are going to be even more diverse. So let's avoid them as much as possible. I know sometimes that the drop downs in FileMaker are short and so on, but again, if we can avoid them, we'll be better understood. And it's not a way to save time. Basically, if we think that we're saving time from how many keystrokes we type on the keyboard, that's not the right place to look for saving time. A name is also not a shorthand or an acronym. So I'm sharing here that there's this one time where I came into a system. It was before when FileMaker had not any IntelliSense that would complete a given calculation for you when you were writing. But the developer there had a bunch of custom functions, and one of them was GSP. And sure thing, GSP was standing for get script parallel because he didn't want to spell it out when he was typing. But turns out, when I was reading the code, I had to decipher for everything that was out there, what were the functions doing? Like, okay, now he spelled this, what native function is it replacing, or is it not a native function, and so on and so on. And basically, it was obfuscating a lot of what was happening and making me lose a bunch of time where he saved literally just a mere couple seconds here and there. So there's a bunch of keyboard utilities. If you want to type something else that gets changed into a full string of text, make sure to use that instead. So a name is also not part of an arbitrary series. So if you see stuff like this, that is a sign that it's more than due for renaming stuff. So script 1, 2, and 3, XYZ new, XYZ old, XYZ new 2. I'm sure you came across some of that somewhere, and it's a red flag to all of us. So let's make sure that we don't perpetuate any of that. A name should also be pronounceable, and it should be easy to search for using our preferred DDR tool. So some examples, I'll go quickly over that. So we have here mostly variables. So $PC or $prodcat, I'm not going to try to pronounce that. $D with a comment next to it that says elapsed time in days, GSP that I spoke about, and if pattern count, blah, blah, blah. So good replacements would be, say, $product category. Okay, let's spell it out. Who would have guessed that PC stood for product category? You would have to rely on the context, and again, it's just, it takes time to look at all that context when we can just put it in plain writing. So, and now that I've said that PC stands for product category, I'm sure that you're guessing already that prodcat stands for product catalog, right? Because when we're talking about abbreviations, there's only one way that it can be expanded into just about anything. No, there's countless things it can expand to. So, and that thing I didn't want to pronounce, well, who would have guessed it was filtered student names? I think no one would have been able to guess it. Again, you need a ton of context to be able to deduct that from this. The variable with the comment next to it, we might say, well, that's more readable. There's a comment right there. And to what I say, well, are we going to keep adding the comment each and every time we use that variable? Because if not, we're asking the reader to hunt for that information at some point in time. And if we are going to put the comment each and every time, then why not just name the variable the way we would write the comment? So I spoke about get script parameter, and the last one is not really about naming, because all of what's there is native FileMaker. So we don't get to choose how pattern count is called. It's called pattern count. But we could replace something like this with a custom function. And just by looking at the name of the custom function, we know what to expect out of it. It's not cryptic, and our
No, it's
eye
not
can.
cryptic in the other case either.
Yeah, yes, but it's shorter to read. So just in terms of what our eye has to parse to look into everything that is going on, if we can save ourselves a little bit of things, then we have something that will be more readable overall. So some recommendations for Booleans. Let's start with is, has, like is paid. Arrays or lists, we can use plurals. Functions and script, let's make sure that we have both a verb and a target. And for everything, it's all about consistency, consistency, consistency. Okay, let's not switch between styles, especially not within a single system. If we are using uppercase for this, let's be consistent. If we are using lowercase, camel case, whatever it is, prefix, suffix, if we are using get and set, let's stick to get and set, not go from get and set to read and write, and so on and so on. So, so that's it. Just a little quote here from John Wooden: if you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it again? And that too applies to naming and making our code more readable. Bad names are like raindrops. A single one is not going to ruin our day, but we never receive a single raindrop. The first one is only there to tell you there is more to come. So something personal I want to share here is about variables. I liked JSON so much when it was introduced in FileMaker 16 that I started naming my variables the same way. I would have in a JSON path, you know, for a script parameter. So it would look something like invoice.bill2.zipcode. And you may or may not like any of that, but I would say for sure do not extend that into fields, because the data API is using field names, actual field names for the keys of the JSON, and having dots in the JSON keys can be problematic. So some more tools. If all you have is a hammer, everything will look like a nail. And by hammer in here, I mean comments. So I'm not going to be going into stuff like error handling or anything, but this, I tell you, will be my next t-shirt, I think. Good code is like a good joke. It needs no explanation. So other tools, let's avoid magic numbers, okay? So if we have something like this, we're looping, and then we say, okay, well, let's make sure that we exit the loop once our counter it's 52. And then we do some stuff and we increment, well, 52 what, okay? So if we set a variable to week count and then do the same loop with week count instead of 52, well, then we know we are looping on weeks, you know, and if we set a variable to deck size and we say, okay, then we're looping on this, then we know that whatever is happening with the do stuff is going to be happening with the cards from the deck. So it tells us way more than if we're just throwing 52 in there. And it doesn't mean that every number out there is a magic number. Like zeros and ones are going to be okay if we're talking about how many hours in a day. No one needs to be taken by the hand for something like that. But there are things that are just not easily available to someone who reads the code and stumbles on a number just like that. So one example that made that clear to me was online there were two functions, and one was using, both of them were using the number 151, okay? And one of them was called "Have I Caught Them All?" and the other one was called "How many more do I have to catch?" And the reveal was simply that 151 was cast to a variable called total Pokemon. And then all of a sudden, everything else became clear. So let's avoid magic numbers. Here, also, let's go easy on negation. By contrast, I recall in the opening, Doug said something about the Zoom waiting room, that it was so you cannot have it. You can't not have it, or whatever. So basically, I don't know if in your layouts, when you're using hide when, you feel that it should be show when instead, but it's bound to happen every now and then. You're going to write something in one form, and you end up having to flip it around, to throw a not and parentheses in front of it to make sure that it gives you what you want to get. And that's because the negative just breaks the flow of how we are used to process stuff, you know. So it's not always going to be easy to switch between the two and interpret what is to be expected as a result, or even the intent. So let's use it only when required. Now let's use indentation. I'm sure there's no surprise here. So we can have something that is, again, very simple. It's not overly complex, and we can all read this, okay, to say, okay, it concatenates the name first and name last, and so on. Now, if we simply make a little bit more effort and make sure that we have something that is indented, then we see the pairs that are standing out. And the comment that is not there because we need the comment. It's there just that to the eye, the pattern is preserved. So it's not rocket science. It's just, okay, let's make sure that we use it some. And I'm saying let's use it some because, like anything, you can use it too much. Okay, so especially in script, if you have many levels of if and loops and so on, you're going to be nested quite a bit. So let's try to avoid that. White space in calculation, again, here on the left, the example is oversimplified, okay? But just throwing in the extra carriage returns, we see things that are standing out in pairs. This, of course, is more problematic when the lines are wrapping. So if you have something that is very long, then your statements and your semicolons may not be easy to spot. You may have expressions that will themselves have their own semicolons. So again, just very basic stuff. White space in scripts. I can't recall when white space in script was introduced, but if you're still not using it today, then you obviously should. It helps us divide the scripts into subsections, and invites us to name those subsections. And we saw that naming is something that can be powerful. So let's rely on that. Custom functions. Well, custom functions are great. They're dry, and that's a bonus. But I think the key element here is that we get to choose the name. And there's a ton of custom functions that we can find online. And I'll say, when we grab something online, let's think, do we absolutely need to use the name that the original author came up with, or should we rename it for something that is more of a match with the style that we have in our own solution? It's not like there's going to be a custom function police coming knocking at our door and say, no, so and so is the author, and you should be using that name instead. So of course, if we're talking about something that is heavily used and shared, then as you copy paste other code that relies on it, if you've renamed it, then it's going to break. So just weigh the pro and cons to renaming here, but I would say oftentimes we overlook that we could rename something just because someone else named it before us. Using let statement is another great way to improve our code readability. Okay, so here we can have something that is dealing with line items in an invoice, and if we look at something that is in the let statement, well, I know right away what I got here is the extended cost, and from that I can bubble up and see, okay, well, what comes into making it the extended cost. So again, 1, 100, and 2 here, they're not magic numbers. We all know what they stand for in something like this. And about let statements, I would say, let's just keep in mind that sometimes they can be more readable, but it can harm performance in some aspects. And it can also be the other way around. You know, you could have a regular calc that if you're not putting in it a let to make sure that something gets evaluated only once, then it's going to get evaluated over and over again if you you keep using it in your calculation. So really depends on the actual calculation you're working with, but all in all, let's make sure to use it. Avoiding null values in our calls. So null values is something that we see often involved into things that are position-based, and position-based can happen, I'm going to say, especially with plugin calls, and sometimes also, depending on your style, with script parameters. So if we are looking at this here, and I say, hey, John, could you add a CC in there? Well, you need to look at the documentation for the call and say, okay, where, like, what's the parameter that's going to take the carbon copy in there, and guess or end. So let's just make things more readable. You know, if you use the same function and you say, okay, well, here it is, the variables are already there. You know, they may be empty, but whoever needs to add the CC or the BCC, then they won't have to guess. They just have to put something in the right variable just before the call gets made, and they won't even have to change the actual call. So I think there's benefits to be had there. Same thing here. I can have something very simple. If we say, okay, I'm adding a phone to a contact, and I say, okay, I'm sending in an ID, something else, and then a cell. So it sounds like the type of phone, and then the actual phone number. But still, if I say, okay, instead I'm sending this, then I know that the second thing that's the is primary phone. I don't need to go look into the script anymore to know what was being sent for the second parameter. It tells me right there what it is expecting. So let's sometimes it's not just about avoiding null values. Sometimes it's also avoiding values altogether. I mean, the variable name could be more explicit than the actual value that that would be in there. So avoiding perform fine with the restore option, I would say it's just obfuscating. So not everyone agrees with me on something like that, but for myself, I don't like having to click through a bunch of dialogues and then be closing windows and so on. I just want to read the script, and it breaks my flow. So I would say let's use regular plain script steps that do what they have to do to achieve the same results, but with more readability. Script parameters, obviously, let's make sure that people know what the script is expecting. If we are not making it clear in the header, and we're starting to raise a variable or use get script parameter on row 57, well, the next thing you know, someone is going to be calling on your script and just not send the required parameter with whatever adverse effect may be. So, I mean, we all should be trapping for errors, but let's make sure that we don't provoke them more than we have to. So for something like this, I'd say some people like to make it even more obvious by putting the name of the parameter into the script name itself. That is something I am shying away from, just because the script name has a hard limit, I think, of 100 characters. But if you feel like that's an option that's good for you, then good for you. Here's a quote that I'm pretty sure all of us know about, and I just made it part of this slide deck because I wanted to point out two things that we may not be aware of. And those two things are here. The initial quote was not just the funny thing about the psychopath. It was also followed by code for readability. And it's not a quote from 5 or 10 years ago. It's not even 15 years ago. It's a quote from 1991. So it pretty much says readability has been a topic that has been a concern for developers for quite some time. Joel Spolsky says, it is harder to read code than to write it. And I love that quote because it's a very simple quote that says a lot. It ties directly into our other quote where we said, any fool can write code that a computer can understand, but we should write code that humans can understand. It's the same thing, but in a shorter version, if you may say. So general rules and recap. Let's explain our magic tricks. There are no secrets that are welcome. There are no bonus points for being sneaky, clever, or having super short code that fits in a single line. We're not trying to save time by save keystrokes. If we do that, we'll end up spending more time. Good naming is more than half the battle. Let's avoid magic numbers, use white space and indentation without nesting too much. Custom functions and let statements are our friends. Let's avoid values in our calls. Never make the reader guess, and spell it out for both find request and variable initializations. By the end of all this, we should have our own writing style, and our own doesn't mean that it's unique. It means that we are fully familiar with it. And if a reader looks at your code at some point, what comes next in your code will be predictable because of the trends and patterns it follows. The way things are will become what the reader expects, and that is when you can say mission accomplished. Now about comments. So something else that is deceptively simple on the surface. Code never lies, comments sometimes do. Code can only do what we tell it to do, nothing else. Comments are not for the computer, they're for us. They drive nothing about our code. And every time we write a comment, if it's about what the code does, if the code is updated, our comment is at risk of being outdated. Comments that tell us what the code does are just heavy maintenance. So you can do so, but know that if you're describing in comments what the code does, chances are there's going to be a heavier burden of maintenance on you and the next guy. So in FileMaker, there's a number of places where we can have comments. And also for that reason, it's not always easy to hunt them all down. So we have field comments, script comments, things that we can put as comments into calculations, either as end of lines or as block comments. And we also have relationship graph notes. So Good comments should tell us why and not how. Let us know the general intent, what we're trying to accomplish, and go over what is obvious. And for variables, it should let us know about, say, what it is we can fit in there in terms of range or valid values or unit of measure if the unit of measure is not itself part of the name. So the three types of comments that we can have comments that are informative, we can have comments that are a warning. For instance, to someone else who debugs your code, you could say, this perform script on server will run for about 5 minutes, and that's normal. You know, there's no way that just looking at the code, you would know how long a perform script on server should take. So that's only something you can do by putting in a comment. And the third type of comment you can get is to-dos, and just make sure that if you use them for to-dos, that someone will come in there, implement that to-do, and take away the comment. Too often, that what we mean to be temporary ends up being almost permanent. So keep that in mind. So code can't explain why the program is being written and the rationale for choosing this or that method. Code cannot discuss the reasons certain alternatives approach were taken. So those are all good things to put down in comments. And I guess to some degree, there's also an overlap here with documentation. So incorrect documentation is often worse than no documentation. And this is not only because being misled is a complete waste of time, but more importantly is because it erodes the trust relationship we have with the code. And everything is about trust. Couple gadgets. So if it's good for Batman, it must be good for me too. I would say, or I would recommend packing these on your adventure. MBS, I'm talking here about the Mac elements that are available for free. MBS is a paid product, and it's also available on Windows, but this here is not available on Windows. And but it lets you check for variables declaration, custom syntax solarization, highlights, matching if and end if, loop and end loop blocks in a script, lets you do find and replace an account, highlighting patterns, search box, custom fonts. It's, I think, more recently.
It's not free.
I'm sorry. So the plugin is a paid plugin, but what is here is available for free. You do not need to have a paid version of the plugin to use this. And I think more recently they've introduced something where they highlight matching pairs in parentheses and brackets and curly braces. Text expanding utility, like I said before. So here's a couple of them: ATEX, text expander, typinator. I think ATEX is like $5. So there's no reason not to use one. If you do use one and you work in a cross-platform environment, I would say try to look for something that will also be working cross-platform, because you're not going to want to maintain your text expansions across two different products. And a snippets holder. So I myself, I'm using Clip Manager, but feel free to be using anything else out there. I'm sure there must be other ones too. And as a bonus, MonoDraw, that is something that is Mac only. But I think there's a link here to something that is web-based that is called texttick.com. So MonoDraw is a bit like Visio, but it uses regular characters to draw the shape. So it's kind of Visio meets ASCII art, if you may. So it's something you can make a workflow with, and then take that workflow and paste it into a relationship graph note. And as long as you make sure that the note itself has the a font that is monospaced, then it's going to come out in a shape that is not necessarily the most beautiful, but still better than just nothing. So, parting notes. There are only two kinds of programming languages those people always bitch about, and those nobody uses. And that is simply to say, if we think the problem is coming from FileMaker, let's think again. Our code is not going to be more readable if we write it in another language. If we think this way, then the problem is likely behind the keyboard. And here is a nice parody, but also a source of inspiration. So if you Google how to write unmaintainable code, you are going to come across this link here. And basically, it's a bit of a lengthy read, but if you look at it and you take every single statement, you flip it around, then you have a great guide on how to improve code readability and code maintenance. So I guess that is all for me, and all I can say now is let's go and write code that others will trust. All right, I'll stop sharing my screen so I can see your faces again. All right, so I'm not too sure on how I did on time, but usually it's where I invite everyone to share if they have not done so anytime before. And curious to know, like I said, really curious to know what is your take on any of this.
Robert, thank you so much for doing this. I know it's really hard to be presenting when everybody's muted and you don't get reaction from anybody. And you might say something funny and not get a laugh, and you might say something interesting and not get a raised eyebrow. It makes it all hard. And thank you so much for doing this. It was excellent. Now, I cannot tell you how crazy it drives me when I see people, when I see scripts that are named things like invoice and, or open. You need to have a noun and a verb. There's the thing that's being affected and the way in which it's being affected. That's your noun, that's your verb. If you don't have both those things, then you have now created a massive problem for the person on the other end, because they have to read, open that script up and figure out what the heck it does. So you started right at the very top level, making it difficult for other people and for yourself, because you're not gonna know what invoice means next time you're looking at that. So anyway, all around, really a good presentation, and you covered so much. Anybody got any questions or anything like that? Comments?
I have a comment to make regarding the that quote from Robert Martin regarding the 10:1 ratio when it comes to reading code versus writing code. I think in the same book, he also mentioned something about your #1 audience is actually yourself. When you write code, in the past, I've worked with developers who truly don't appreciate working in a team. And so they would, in turn, not understand the importance of writing clean code. But in reality, they are the one that's going to read those code 10 minutes or 24 hours from when they're writing it. And it's just yesterday when I was doing a pair programming session with one of our juniors, I saw him creating a function with both a while function nested with a let function. So when he's doing that, when he's writing the code, he choose not to add indents when he could. And it's just 10 minutes later when he's trying to expand on that formula he just created to add some additional features. It took him 3 minutes to find out where do all those brackets should go. Because with those two functions together, you have all sorts of brackets flying around, and without proper indents, it's just really difficult to read. And that was an example of, it's just when you don't have a clean, don't have good readability on your code, most likely you're tripping yourself instead of somebody else. And
Yes,
also,
and I'm sorry, go on.
And also that book from Robert Martin, The Clean Code, it's a really good read. Highly recommend that to everybody.
What's the name of the book? Wait, how?
Clean Code.
Yeah, got it.
So I think about us being the first audience, it is true, but at the same time, I don't like to think of it too much because I think it's part of the problem, is what I think. You know, I think that the way we tend to code is to think that, okay, yeah, I'm the one who's going to have to be dealing with this. So if it's not readable, then it's on me. And as you are writing the code, of course, you're never going to think that it's unreadable, because you're fully in the zone. You have the context, you have everything that you need to figure things out. But as you clearly said, in some cases, depending on what you're dealing with, within minutes, you can be looking at the same code and not being able to figure out things that you were just doing. I think there's another funny internet meme or something like that said, like, when I was writing this code, only God and I knew what I was doing, and now only God knows. You know. So
It's, you know, I think it's also it's a fallacy that convention alone saves you. Like adopting a set of conventions and sticking with it is the solution, because you can have a very strict set of conventions that you stick to religiously, and they can, if your convention is complicated, then it becomes a lot more that you have to juggle in your head in order to get to understanding again. And so what you want, so the goal is to have not just a strict set of conventions that you stick to dogmatically, but, or religiously, I should say, but to have a set of conventions that's simple enough that you can interpret easily. Well, I have worked in systems that have been really carefully maintained and have very strict conventions, but those conventions are so onerous that they make getting around and doing things quickly entirely impossible.
And I think you mark a good point about the conventions. It's about being able to interpret them, and that is the part that gets skipped over too often, because people will put a crazy amount of time coming up with the convention to start with, you know. But then when it comes to having new hires and tell them why it is that things are shaped the way they are shaped, you know, they spend next to no time at all. They just say, okay, well, that's the way it is. And people, they're launched into those solutions, and they mimic the patterns, you know, but do they understand even why they're implementing those patterns? Not all the time. And I think where you get the most out of something like a set of conventions is when people do understand that, okay, this is what this is trying to enforce, and here's the goodies that you get out of it, you know, whereas here is the pain that you would get if you were not doing it this way. So conventions are good, and they're going to help you stay consistent, but most of all, know why you are doing something.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have another thing to add to the comment. To the comment subject, which is, again, I think that was mentioned in the book, which is, I guess comments is not an excuse for bad code. It doesn't make up for bad code. So don't comment bad code, just rewrite it. I feel like this is, well, comments is something that I find myself writing less and less in the past few years. And I find that sometimes just meaningful naming, consistent spacing, and even just a better architecture in the code itself does a lot than trying to write an article or write a paragraph explaining the mess that I just made. So rather than spending time writing very long, complex comments, sometimes if I find myself doing that, I should really look at the code, the script, the function below that, and see if I did something wrong there.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think to I think lean in to what you're saying here. When I read, say for instance, when I read a script, okay, well, I'm reading the script. I'm not reading the comments, or I am reading the comments at the same time, you know, but I assume that the previous developer will be courteous enough to make sure that the comments that are there are not interrupting the flow of me reading the script. Okay, so it basically, I should still be able to read the script without the comments being there. The comments are nice and supposed to shape a couple things and make it easier for me to read things and know the intent. But if I come across something that is just a chunk of text that then it breaks the flow, you know, and I have to read again or whatever, because I'm jumping from a comment to code and then more comments and then more code and so on and so on. Whereas if you have something that is really just top to bottom, you feel like even if there are comments, you're mostly reading code, then you've read the script and you know what it's doing, you know, because the comments in some cases they're not that reliable. So
yeah, absolutely.
Look at this. I'm going to show you something really quickly. So here is a relationship graph, and just by looking at it, you can tell this is the product of an organized mind. This is someone who is taking the time to really be careful about the way that things are being put together. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit. When we start to look at the conventions, notice that there are C's and D's preceding things, and S's and some other letters. This is absolutely impenetrable. Like, look at the configuration tables names. Now, I'm a big proponent of using, creating abbreviations and naming tables with abbreviations. I think that when you get long strings of table occurrences, it makes it readable, and I'm all for that. But you have to really understand a lot before you can do a single thing inside of this system. And it turns out that it's more complicated even than it appears here. And there is a massive amount of redundancy in the table occurrences that are on this graph. And as a result, it's an absolute nightmare to make any change because you're not sure what else you might be affecting. And whether you're also not sure if you're doing it in the most efficient way given the rest of the structure. So just absorbing this and getting all of this into your head is a massive, massive undertaking. And what they've done is left this company with a massive amount of technical debt. This is now suddenly a really, really expensive system to work in. And it's not because they didn't have a set of conventions that they followed religiously, because they did. That's not the only aim.
Mm-hmm.
That really drives it home. Anyway, I think maybe, unless somebody has something really burning that they want to bring up, we should move on to Henry. Are we good with that?
I have, sorry, Robert, good stuff. I agree with just about everything except for the table occurrence abbreviations. I kind of agree with Doug. It does make sometimes sense if you have long table occurrence names. But I just, this graph just reminded me that there's one more point here that might be helpful, and that's color coding TOs. I use it to identify easily the source tables, so it's kind of a useful tip, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Particularly if you're not using anchor buoy or something like that, where they're obvious just by looking, then yeah, it makes a big difference.
One more comment. That the idea of documentation occurring in two different places. I solved that problem a few years ago. I don't remember exactly how I did it, but in the field names, the comment part would have a note for the developer explaining what right there in the comment name, or in the comment, and then I can't remember what the separator was, but then the tooltip information relating to a field or a button or whatever, well, not in the button, but that would go in the tooltip thing, but it could activate it by a key command. And that way you can see exactly what the instructions are to the user, and it's right there in the actual field, and other things as well. So, because keeping things in sync is really hard once there's a change here and there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I just want to make sure I do understand. So in what you're describing, the developer used the field comments and they cross that with tooltips?
Either tooltips or actual dialog boxes in different cases. But,
okay.
But everything that was communicated to the developer or to the user was just in the comment. It had to be short. Mm-hmm. And the other way to do it was to have an actual documentation table with fields and linking to that, which I preferred. But the nice thing about having it in the definition, field definition, is that it's also right there, the instructions and mm-hmm. the script. So it's really easy to understand.
I see. Charles, you wanted to share something there?
No, it's just somebody's texting me.
Okay.
Sorry, unrelated.
So, but with the tooltips, I would say I try to not use them as much as I can, because I wish in FileMaker, you know, when we replicate something, like copy paste or whatever it is that we use to replicate something, the expectation is that the new object is going to be an exact replica of the previous one. And I kind of wish that for tooltips would get like thrown out to the trash for anything that you replicate, because more often than not, there's no single tooltip that I want to see inherited by another object that I'm replicating, but that's just me. So I mean, I came across some systems where there were a bunch of things that had tooltips that clearly were not meant to be the tooltip for the thing they were on.
There is an option in layout mode to turn on a little, what do you call it?
Yeah, the badges.
Little badge for that. But you do have to remember to do that when the file is local, unfortunately. And the other reason to avoid tooltips is if you ever plan to use your app on a touch device, it's obviously not good enough. So you need to think of a better way anyway.
Mm.
Henry, are you still awake?
I'm still awake, and I enjoyed that very much, Robert. Thank you.
No, thank you
very much, Robert. Really interesting. Lots of great stuff, and applause all around. Henry, why don't you tell us a little bit about how to prepare for the afterlife?
Okay, so I put together a bit of a keynote presentation, which is hopefully a little bit fun, just to get us going. And substantial part of what I want to do is get a discussion going, so we can brainstorm together. But I'd like to start with the keynote, if you could share my screen.
No, you actually share your screen. So down.
Oh, I can just do it then. Eh? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, do I have to? Am I sharing? No, I'm not. Okay, go ahead.
So, actually, first I should start the presentation.
That'd be pretty dangerous if we could share somebody else's screen.
Oh, just a sec. Share.
Share somebody else's camera.
Let's try this now. Oh, now I can't do it.
I don't know if I'd want that. No offense.
Stop. Stop. Escape. Sorry. Okay. Maybe we'll just have to do this. And I can just minimize that. Is that okay like that? Okay. Everybody can see that first page?
Yeah, we can see like all the Chrome though. Do you want to put it in presentation mode? It's okay if you want to do it.
Let me try presentation and let me know if it's working. Yeah, it's working?
Yeah.
Okay. So my company's Mac Wizard. I'm an independent developer. Been around for a while. And although I live in Toronto, I moved up with my family to the Collingwood area last March due to COVID, because some of my family members are rather vulnerable. So I've been living in the country, right on the water, pretty wild sometimes. I don't have quite the high speed I had in Toronto, which was like 600 megabits per second download, but it's still good enough, I hope. So let's move on. Here's what my presentation is called. This is a real coincidence. Okay, so I'm going to stop it there because I want to relate another true story. So I think I'll just escape that and stop the screen share for a sec. So my late father was a pretty bright man. He was a journalist and a professor. And he was still pretty sharp at age 79 and playing tennis every week and going out to about 4 movies and plays a week. A pretty active guy, but things started to go downhill after that. And he was in a retirement home when my brother decided, while my father was still fairly with it, we should get a lawyer in and revise the will. So my brother's good friend's father was a lawyer. He came in and we had a meeting in the retirement home with my father. And the lawyer had written up or rewritten the will with modern terminology and approach. And it was pretty straightforward, a very simple will in the sense that if my father went, his assets would go to my mother. And then when she went, the 3 kids would split them evenly. So pretty straightforward. And the lawyer went over these points with my father, and he seemed to be taking it all in. And then he said, okay, but I have one question. You said 100% goes to my wife and then 33% to each child after that. But what do I get? And the lawyer says, no. You don't get anything. This is after you go. But my father says, but I don't understand. What do I get? He just could not see a world, could not imagine a world without him in it. And the lawyer had to say, Ben, you're not in the picture. So that's a bit of a challenge for some people. And probably, if you dig into this, you'll see how I've tried to dig in kind of deeply into what would be involved. You kind of take for granted a lot of things. But if you go through the process that I went through, and I wouldn't say I've gone through it all the way even, but there's a lot to consider. So I'll get back to the presentation. I'm going to skip a little bit here. Just give me a second and then I'll do the screen share. Okay, I think we'll go right in here. So Zoom, screen share, there it is, share, and go. So let me just, I'll let this run for a little bit. Oh, okay, so I'm going to stop and go back to that. So if someone had to step in to fill your shoes, let me just go back here. What are you sort of leaving for the next person that comes in? I imagine all of us are either working on a new database or revising something, working for customer requests, or maybe we're just working on a project that we hope to be able to pitch to somebody. I don't know, but in any case, you have to give thought to what it is you're working on and how to let the person that steps into your shoes know about that. So I'll talk about how I've approached that. Now, let's say that you are hospitalized, or let's say that you've actually been killed. You're totally out of the picture. You've died from something. And some customer of yours has a problem, or they just want feature requests, whatever. So they phone you on your cell phone, as they've done for years, or they send you an email, as they've been doing for years, and they don't get an answer. Well, where are they going to turn to? How will they proceed? Are they going to look up FileMaker on the web and say this happened, or can we give them an easy path? Next, let's say that you are responsible for the hosting of the database and there's an outage, or backups have filled up the drive and there's no more space. And also, you know, how is that hosting going to continue if the monthly payments don't continue? I mean, does your partner know about those? Do you have an accountant that's going to look after this? So some documentation about the whole hosting setup is definitely in order. Okay, I'll go on to the next slide. Let's just run it this way. So I'm suggesting that you create a database to cover all this stuff, and that you, let me just stop again, that we find some, but you know, one buddy or several people or a handful of people that would agree to step in if you pass away or are totally incapacitated. So Charles Delfs and I kicked this around several months ago, the idea of a buddy. And you may feel like you have good friends among our peers here, but it doesn't mean that they would necessarily be able or willing to step into your shoes. There's a lot to consider here. And part of it may be that they need to feel comfortable with your style, your coding, your business model, whatever. But you know, also maybe we need to talk about if there's a substantial amount of time involved. Let's talk about remuneration. You know, how, if you're going to step in for someone and you have to put in 20 hours a week for 4 weeks, you know, you've got to be paid for that somehow. So that will be part of the discussion. Let's see what we got here. So in my database, which I'm going to demonstrate in a minute, I'm saying at least 4 tables: customers, their databases, sometimes there's several per customer, the servers that those databases run on, and also personal info that you, the developer, need to give over to your buddies. So there'll be lots in there. We'll look at that. Also for each customer, a summary of the business logic of their company. For each customer, obviously we need their contact data. Notes that would include things like, okay, this company A, the owner is such and such, but the receptionist is the one that I usually liaison with. And when it comes to technical stuff, you know, Joe Smith is pretty good in understanding that, you know, the nuts and bolts. So that kind of contact information is good. And then could be all kinds of things to convey about the database itself and about the hosting. And then I've got this note here about thoughtful commenting of scripts. So I guess we've already covered that in detail, but you know, just give some thought as to, are your scripts going to be easily understood by the next person? Okay, and then finally, with respect to the database, does anybody ever use video, either for your customers or for other devs? You can make a little short video and embed it in this database I'm talking about. It might be a time saver for the person. And if not, perhaps screenshots in a text document would be helpful, just to give a bit of an overview. And again, this could be where the business logic is discussed. And then, you know, when you're on a certain layout and you're new to a database, you look at the layout and you see what you see, but you don't necessarily see certain things that are hidden, like pop-ups. You know, so if there are script triggers that are going to trigger a popover or a card in FileMaker Go, maybe you want to make a list of those, or maybe you want to comment that into your scripts, but maybe maybe screenshots of that particular layout and just point out something about that, because that could be a time saver. Okay, obviously the developer credentials need to be conveyed. Wouldn't hurt to have the version of the FileMaker. And the next line is pretty obvious about hosting. So I'm going to show you what I've created, and it's not finished or anything, but it's a start. And I think if I zoom in, it's better. I'll make this full screen. So I'm going to go to the customer to start with.
Henry, we can't see if you zoom in.
Oh,
well, depending on the type of zooming that you use. So if you're using your screen zooming, like what is it, control scroll, that we can't see.
no, I just hit the 150 on FileMaker, but
oh, that works. We are not looking at your screen right now, or the correct screen, I guess.
oh, really? Okay, okay, I understand.
Your desktop, not just a screen.
I have to share again and grab the right screen. Sorry.
That's right.
Yeah. Where is it? You know how many windows you got open when you can't find it? There we go. Share. And then, so you can probably see it and I can't. Okay. Now, if I go to 150, can everybody see the entire, or almost the entire screen?
Pretty darn close, where you can't see the very bottom part, and we can't see the very right part.
Yeah, so I can scroll around a bit, but that's probably better.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Okay. So on the left, customer info. So here's I just put in some fake data about Roadrunner. But here, the customer notes, this could be very helpful, even just a few sentences before you phone up the company, right? That company may have more than one database, so you can list them here. I've got a little mask over passwords. Obviously, we can employ encryption at rest before you send this database out, but we'll talk about that again later. And then the server, the way I've set this up is I've got a value list of different servers. So in my case, it's very simple. One of my companies has their own server. Well, actually more than one. This bottom one is one that I'm responsible for. The other one is a company that I just pay to, ODTech. So if I grab this, then this populates. If I grab a different one, things change over here. So that's simple relationship. And then down below, sorry, I'll just go through this a bit more. So let's take this company, ODTech. I pay them a certain amount per month, and I have 3 different solutions hosted there. And I'm allowed so much bandwidth and 5 iOS devices per solution. So it's pretty affordable. It's back on server 14. Now, that company runs several locations. So this is the particular location. That's the address for that. And then if I want to go into their website and do some admin things, then we need my credentials for their website. There's a phone number for it. Then if I want to do something in FMS admin, I've got my credentials for that here as well. And that's what I'm paying. So any questions about that? No? Okay. And then down below, just another portal where we can see the various database solutions for that particular client. And if you, I just set up a bit of a link, so this will take me to that particular database. I've got the name, the version of FileMaker it was developed in, the developer's name, developer's password. And I think that the backup information will be very helpful as well. If you inherit someone's work, you want to know about what's going on with the backups without having to go into every single database and go into FMS admin and explore what the backup schedules is. It'd be nice to just see what it is. So in my case, I not only use internal backups, but I also use a cloud-based service called iDrive.com, which is pretty affordable. It's about 70, 80 bucks US for 5 terabytes. So, and I've used that to great effect to be able to look up, you know, quite old backups, and it's been very helpful. So that's pretty much all I wanted to show you. Oh, well, there's another thing to discuss. Now, for some of my customers, well, one in particular, they wanted, they use a lot of iPads, and they use the Apple Mail program on the iPad to send out quotes and even invoices from FileMaker. So when sending out their quotes, they wanted to have a company signature with logo in Apple, in the iOS Mail. And in order to accommodate that, I don't know if anybody's ever done that, but there's a bit of a crazy set of steps to go through. And the last step involves shaking the iPad back and forth. And then you select something about inherit attributes or disinherit attributes, I can't remember. And then you get the actual, well, what it does is it displays the logo that you've put up on a website. So I decided that I would create the web page for them, and it's under my domain, macwizard.ca. So then the whole question is, well, do you have any domains, and are those important either for hosting or for things like signature, custom signatures like this, like I've just explained? And if you don't detail that, for instance, okay, the domain is registered with such and such company, and it's hosted by another company, and I pay every 3 years, or I pay every year, and so on. You know, someone's got to take that over and keep it running. So, or convert it. So anyway, that's just another thing to watch out for. Just look at my other table, see if there's anything else I want to mention. Customer service. I think that covers it for now. I'll stop that sharing. And then I think we should go back to a discussion. I mean, we started a discussion. Just bear with me for 1 second. I'll look at my notes there. So as I said, Charles and I kicked this around a little bit a while ago. And we really didn't come up with the perfect solution, but we had a couple good ideas. But the big question, I think, is once you've got an agreement from one or more people that they will be your buddy, then what are you going to do about getting the database to them? Do you want to send it to them ahead of time, encrypted, and not give them the credentials? Or do you want to give them credentials right away and say, please don't open until I'm gone? Do you want to give the credentials to someone else so that 2 people have to collaborate before the thing will get opened? Should we create a SOFA registry for this purpose? That's another option. And part of that is even thinking about, well, what would the process be to determine if it's time for the database to be open? You know, is it just because I can't be reached for a little bit, or if I've been in hospital, do we wait a week, or do we wait a month? Or you know, let's take a terrible, you know, worst case scenario. I die along with my whole family in a fire or something, or a plane crash, and beyond, so my immediate family, how can the ball get rolling? So those are just some things I want to throw out there for discussion. and let's see what people have to say. Okay. So I'll turn it over to you, Doug, I guess.
Well, and how would things change if you were, say, murdered or drowned?
Thanks for the points on the end.
Wow, this is very cheerful. I mean,
well, you're right. It's not exactly a light topic, but you know what? If you think about your driving habits, I'm sure everybody wears seatbelts in Canada. By the way, in the United States, does everyone know this? That I think there's a law that you're supposed to wear a seatbelt, but and maybe not in every state. Maybe it's just recommended in some. But the crash testing that they do and the certification for safety in the United States has to provide for the fact that the occupants may not be wearing seatbelts. So in other words, they don't want to go so far as to say everybody should always wear a seatbelt in a car. But crazy as it is, because they like their freedom in the United States. But here, I think we're a little more sane. So we all wear seatbelts. But as far as some of these other risks, we probably haven't even faced it, or we don't want to. But it wouldn't hurt to give it some thought. So that's what I'm trying to push for tonight.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be that you come to an untimely death. It could also be, as Michael points out in the notes, that you could be incapacitated for some period of time. Who knows why? I mean, anything can happen to anyone at any time, and this has given us a lot of really interesting things to think about, and it certainly makes clear to me how much work I have to do to make things easier for other people. You know, my mother is 87 and in not great shape, and she spent most of the last, I'd say, about 18 months just getting her affairs in order. And my sister and I are very grateful, because it's means that things are going to be so much easier for us than if we had to dig into her stuff and try to figure it out for ourselves. So I certainly appreciate you bringing up all of these things.
Yeah, I mean, you say it's not a light topic, but it's not a year of light topics, right? And like Doug said, I mean, we, Chris and I did this at the beginning, because we could both get COVID, right? And that's our business. And, how's that going to play out? But even I went to Russia with a friend for a couple weeks a few years ago. And before I went, he had me document everything before I went, just because he was nervous about it. Was when they had shut down the embassy, the St. Petersburg embassy and everything. And so it's a good exercise, regardless of whether it's light time or whether you're, anything can happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just as a point, just to show that anything can happen. I went for skiing. I went skiing for a day with my dad in 2016, and he had an episode, and that was his time, and he was done. He died that day, and he was about to go out on the ski hill. So he was healthy as far as we knew, and it just, probably had a stroke or something. And so Henry is very smart to prepare this. You must, we are all, unfortunately, many of us are older, and we should document as much as we can for our customers and for our families, wherever we can, so that we can find everything. My father was a lawyer. He had some ongoing issues. We had to call in somebody he worked with. My stepmother had to arrange for the transfer of his lawyer's trust account to that other lawyer, and various other financial things. We had to go through any files, and I mean, it was, at least everything was there because he was a lawyer. Everything was documented. We just had to find where everything was. But these things can be sudden and completely unexpected.
And even regardless of age, right? Because
Absolutely. I mean, my father was 82, but you know, he was slim, he was fit, he'd been going to the gym 3 or 4 times a week. You know, we just went to the ski hill, and before we ever got on the hill, he had a stroke. At least we assume it was a stroke. We don't know what happened. It just, you know, we were up in Collingwood and rushed to the hospital, and that was that.
There was a story in the New York Times this week about a 32-year-old who contracted the COVID virus, and within days he was dead. 32 years old, and he was in good health before that.
Absolutely. In times of COVID, it's even more, you know, like you said, it can happen suddenly.
Yeah, and it's not just dying. You could just be out. You could be out for 2 weeks, and
I'd like to suggest combining both of these sessions, because about 3 years ago, I got called into a place where the developer had died in an accident. And it was Doug, you had that ER graph with the short forms. This project was brilliant. It was unbelievably complex, but there was no legend to the code. And it's like, holy smokes. So when you're planning succession for this stuff, you know, you should be billing people for that insurance that we have provided proper documentation, everything, and like build it into the bill. And so anyway, I just thought that it was great that these two sessions were together, because it's really all part of the same thing. It's like making sure there's continuity and that somebody can take over.
I like what you're really saying here, Stefan. I mean, can I ask what the proper pronunciation for your name is? Is it Stefan?
Yichel Zimkovics. Stefan
Wonderful.
Yichel Zimkovics Podgrabinski.
Okay. Very good. So I'll shy away from pronouncing your name.
Yeah, that's not readable code.
Stefan is fine.
So
it's not readable code. Yes, that's fine.
But no, but to your point, I think we have to keep in mind when doing this, who it is you're doing it for, okay? Because technically speaking, you're not doing it for yourself. You're not going to be there anymore. So are you doing it for your code buddy? I mean, yes, they're going to enjoy having an easier ramp up into any solutions that may be out there. But most of all, if you're doing it, you're doing it for the customer. So when you began your set of slides with the person who said, "Can you restart the server?" And by the way, what should we do if you end up in a newspaper? You know, so I think your perfectly viable answer would be to say, yeah, sure, let's discuss about this. What's the budget you want to set aside for something like this? You know, and the point I'm trying to make here is even though customers may have some awareness of all of this, when it comes time to pay for it or pay for things like training and documentation, I'm not saying that everyone is like this, and it could be that it's only the customers I've been in touch with, you know, but a good number of them tend to prefer like adding features or reports or changing things into the system instead of fledging out a documentation or something that is going to ensure that changing hands from one developer to another is going to be easier. And the thing is, if and when they opt to pay for that, it's very difficult for them to know ahead of time, is it actually worth what they paid for? You know, when they ask you for a feature, or say this new report, you know, they can run it, they can test it, they can say, okay, yes, it outputs what I expect to see in there, and how is it they can know that someone else is going to be able to take over until it happens? I mean, and I would, before planning for that, I think they should plan for disaster events in their own business, and that sometimes, but not sometimes, that oftentimes get overlooked, you know. So let alone like what's going to happen in a hypothetical scenario that involves someone else, you know. Tell me how it is. Have you tested your backups? You know, have you spent have you tried to see what it is you could do if you could do if all the systems were down for 24 hours, you know. And from there, let's talk about the rest. But I think a lot of this, I mean, we've all taken on systems from others with next to no documentation. You know, you just barely get this Swift knife and a rough map that has stuff on there that is not even valid, you know. And people say, well, figure your way out, you know. And that's our job. I mean, it comes with the chair, and we're okay with it. But there are things that can help. I mean, if we're looking at the things you put out there, there are ways that we could say, okay, for passwords, we'll build keychains, and there are solutions out there that will see that the keychains will be turned over to someone else, like break the glass if in case of emergency type of thing, you know. And there's I'm forgetting about the other elements of the presentation, but I think we can take different aspects of it in the same sense. Now, also, I'd say we should work in a way that we are not required for things to work. You know, when I'm hearing about having assets being on websites that we control instead of our customers' websites, that is something I would advise against. You know, I would say, well, those assets for the email signature, they should be part of their own domain, and this way, if there's anything that happens, they can handle it. They're good to go. Someone else can do that without having to backtrack and figure out how it worked. I mean, we had that at one place where I used to work for email signatures, and they realized that as a switch going to happen for the old emails, people who would consult the old email after the fact, once we've taken down the server, I mean, that old email would no longer show the picture, the logo of the business, you know. And there's nothing that could be done about that. It went from our servers to their servers when it should have been on their servers in the first place. So it is what it is. But I think, yeah, one, the customer has to pay for it, and second, we need to make sure that we're not essentials.
Okay, so a couple points, Robert. Those are great points. But what about even just email, a business email that you have, you becoming the deceased? How is a customer, you know, the customer sends an email to the deceased, doesn't get a reply back. So this is where I think we need to be able to give something to our clients. Like when we work through, it's a great point about get the customer to pay for it. I think we could easily say, you know, when I develop to keep the cost down. I've coded here, but I haven't fully documented for someone else to take over, because that's a lot of extra expense. But you're asking me for a succession plan, or you're asking me for an emergency situation to be covered. So there is a cost, and I will charge by the hour, or I will do it for $1,000 or whatever. You work something out. But when that's agreed upon, then I think we would have to give the customer one or several phone numbers or email addresses of our buddies to get the support that they need, so that they know ahead of time that if something happens, they've got these email addresses or phone numbers to fall back on. Does anybody?
Of course, having recommendations is good, but the customers are free by themselves also. You know, if we say, okay, I end up on a hospital bed for 2 weeks, you know, if for those 2 weeks they can't do anything and they end up picking up the phone and reaching out to someone else because they need service, you know, it is like business has to keep going on, whether it is with someone we recommend or with someone we know nothing about. It's their business. They're free to handle it. That should not be left out of sight.
Yeah,
Right.
the buddy system is interesting, but I do think it's really important that the client has a way to save themselves, because you know, your buddy might not be available, or your buddy might not be interested, or there may have been your buddy may have lost the keys. You know, so there's all kinds of things that can go wrong with the buddy. One thing that I've done for a client that I did hosting for is when we got started, I hand delivered 2 pieces of paper that were copies of each other that had the encryption at rest key on them, and as well as other critical information that would be needed to download copies of the database and so forth. And I told them that one of them goes in your safe deposit box and one of them goes in your on-site safe. And if you lose it, you know, consider that you could lose your entire software system. So be careful with this information.
Now, one complication, I like that, but here's a complication perhaps. What, I mean, you're essentially giving them the keys to your system, right? You're giving them dev credentials?
Well,
Yeah.
when you say your systems, I think in what Jason is saying is it's their system. It's not Jason's system. Am I right, Jason?
Yeah, and obviously there's different licensing models, and you may have a system that you sell as a vertical, and that's a little bit different. It's a little harder to do this.
Yeah, I think in all honesty, if you're an independent dev, I think you're not getting paid enough to cover too much other people's asses, right? Yeah, like, you know, I think what you should really be looking at doing is saying, how can I pass on the intellectual property to my kids in some fashion? How can I sell my clients after I get kicked off to you guys, right? This doesn't apply to my business, but we have a different type of contingency plan. But I mean, if I just have a regular client, I still have a few clients. I mean, really, I think that's way more valuable. And we haven't really touched on that.
I agree with you, Charles.
We're all going on the, like, as if we're just giving our stuff away. Like, F that. You can buy it. No offense, but I mean, I think that's a reasonable thing. I have clients that pay me X hundreds of dollars a month. Like Jason, we were just talking about this. Like, I would say, hey, you want to buy it? You know, leave it. Here's the setup. Give the money to my kid, and you know, here's the paperwork. Some kind of system like that, so we can pass on our clients without them getting all scooped up somehow.
Here's an idea for how to make this work. So build into the code for all of your clients, all of your stuff has a dead man switch. So you have to log in every week. It's just you run a script that says, yeah, I'm still here. Nobody sees this. It's all in the background. One day when you bite it, you don't press the button. You've got maybe a little fail-safe, a few days, but eventually a script will run to inform the client that something's happened to you. Now,
well,
maybe you're
you're going to have that level of complexity. It's just, that's no different than the password, right? That's exactly, if you're going to build in some kind of dead switch, that implies they don't have the password. So just don't give them the password, and you don't have to switch.
No. I'm saying that, like, I have clients that I don't hear from for months or even years, and so they're not going to know that they don't have any support. I'm just saying that if we could have a way because when something happens to you, if you're in the hospital, you can't if you're in a coma, you can't tell people that you're out of commission. I'm just saying every week when you start work, you just log in. It's like a punch clock. I'm here. And then when you don't log in, a predetermined script can say that you're out of commission for whatever reason.
Yeah,
Or
what I'm just saying is
options.
don't build something so complicated. Just give the password to your kids and a note that says.
What if you don't have kids? What if you don't have
Okay,
people?
well,
and
what
you've
if you're
got
gonna,
kids?
who's gonna the same action process that's gonna go with your dead man switch? I'm saying don't worry about the apparatus, because in order to bypass that, you have to have control of the database. So that already implies that you don't have the password or they don't have.
I'm guessing there's a service out there that does this.
Yeah, I'm sure there's got to be.
Or and if there isn't, there's ones popping up.
So, but you'd have to, my point is that if it's not built into each system that you make, then you're going to have to document this. So in your will, when it comes across, okay, we have to contact all these people and give them all credentials and whatever. I'm just saying that you can pre-build it in with whatever.
I think what would be really useful though, and that would be something that I would subscribe to if I had enough clients that have enough sellable IP, that I would subscribe to a system for $30 a month, say. And if I know that it's almost like a life insurance, it's basically I'm selling my business in some fashion. I think that would be kind of interesting to explore.
You mean you are selling your business? Is that what you meant?
Well, let's say I have 20 clients and each client pays me $300 a month. Right? So that each client is basically worth $3,000 roughly, say, a year. Right? So that's, $60,000. So it's $60,000 of renewable revenue. Now, wouldn't it be nice to know that when you die, all of that stuff just doesn't get scooped up by everybody around you? And in some fashion, they can buy into it, and it's a reasonable amount. If they spend $1,000, $2,000 for the first year, they're going to, knowing that this is a returning on the ROI, that they could get that. I mean, that's just an interesting idea. It's basically an insurance policy for your IP. I'm just throwing that out there, like instead of just looking at just giving away the farm. We're all working our asses off. Why not develop something that has some sellable value? We have it's like an exit plan, you could say.
Interesting, Charles. That's a business model that you're throwing out there to the world for free that someone could take and run with.
Yep.
It's really interesting idea. There's got to be something there. It's a very interesting idea.
So Doug, I had a prezzo that I could give you guys on that. Right. So Charles knows all the stuff that sort of I've done in terms of setting up that model that you can actually sell, because you got to get revenue stream into a business that you can actually say to a customer that this is the monthly revenue from the business, like it's continual, right? So most other businesses, when you're trying to sell them, they look at like 7 times or 10 times revenue and stuff like that, right? So as developers, you guys got to build the business so that you have a monthly revenue stream from your customers, right? So there's ways of doing that so that you can actually say to somebody, saying, I got like 6,000 coming in every month without me doing one thing, right? Okay, because I just continually bill them for a service and stuff like that, right? So that model actually exists. It's something that I've been building for years, right? And so I don't really go after like new customers and stuff like that. So all the new stuff that I'm doing, it's all on a model that is a recurring revenue. Okay, instead of going after the big, development fee and stuff like that, you break it down into a smaller monthly thing that you can continually get. And for the last 10, 20 years, from about a dozen customers, I get monthly fees from them all, right, basically.
Interesting. Very interesting. You know what? We should do one where we just talk about different business models, ways of billing and that sort of thing. I know I kind of have veered away from the idea that was put forward, but there are lots of interesting things for us to pursue down this in this neighborhood, I think.
My day job is a lawyer. I'm not a FileMaker developer except for my own practice. And I do wills and estates. And as I hear everybody talking from the FileMaker perspective, one of the things you have to consider if you're an independent businessman or business person is that on death, whatever you've built up in life, assuming it can be passed to someone, kids, another colleague, whatever, is going to run through a little bit of tax by the government. And one of the ways that you can save tax is to speak to your lawyer and ask for 2 wills, not 1, but 2. One that contains assets such as your business that doesn't require probate to transfer, and the other one for things like bank accounts that you can't really get around because everybody, all the banks require probate in order to give you or give your beneficiaries your money. So that by using the 2 will strategy, you can save the estate administration tax of 1.5% on your business as it gets transferred to your beneficiaries, to a colleague, whatever.
Very valuable information. I did not know that. Really interesting. So in short, you have 1 will for everything that goes through probate, another will for your business. You're thereby avoiding the, what is it, 1.5%, did you say?
1.5% estate administration tax. Now, there are other types of assets, certain types of real estate that also qualify for inclusion in a secondary will. But for the context that we're talking about here, the principal one is a business that is not publicly traded. As long as it's not publicly traded, you do not need probate to transfer an Ontario business.
Very interesting. Thank you for that.
So I just want to come back to the original challenge, though. Okay, I'll just take my own situation. I for the most part, have been charging for my development time by the hour, and any revisions and maintenance and that sort of thing. I don't have David Hong's model, which I like it very much, but I can't go back with the X number of customers that I currently have and say, hey, do you want to start paying me so much per month? I know you've already paid me already. Going forward, I can do that. But for anything that's existing, these companies are relying on me. They're relying on, in 1 or 2 cases, they're running their own servers, but they rely on me to help them with it if anything comes up. That's pretty simple. But in other cases where they're paying me per month and I'm paying a hosting company, or they're paying me and I'm actually running a Windows server on something like AWS, I'm pretty crucial to their company continuing to run. So that's where I think we've got to have some kind of plan, and everybody can come up, of course, with their own plan. But I do think it's important that I love Robert's idea of charging for creating the proper system and documentation. And I do think that after doing that, we have to be able to give our clients a set of steps to take to get things rolling again. So in other words, either we decide we'll give them the keys and they're on their own, they have to find their own FileMaker developer, or we make some suggestions, or we have a full-fledged buddy or buddies that, provided they're available at the time, they have the flexibility at the time of our passing, that they can step in and step into our shoes and just take over. So that's probably how I'm going to proceed myself.
See, I don't know if that's right. You're letting the customer lead this whole thing. How about I just have a document that says to Jason Perry here, who is a developer that I work with, and I say, Jason, if something happens to me, this is one of my clients. This is how much you can charge them. They already have a note that I've already sent them a note that if anything ever happens to me, Jason's going to be assuming the account, and he'll be your main contact person, and that's it. And then Jason says, thanks. You know what? When that happens, I'll maybe I'll give you some money back or something like that to my estate or however it works. And then we're done with it. And then the customer is not looking around saying, well, maybe I should go with this other person, or maybe I should go with that person. And I actually get some value out of it. I can offer that to somebody at this point when I'm alive.
Yeah, but the customer is still free. I mean, he's not obliged to.
Yeah, they are free. But if you just let them go willy-nilly and say, here you go, and then they're going to start looking around. Do you really want that?
Well, you can't.
I have a customer. I have a great customer. I hardly do anything for them. They pay hundreds of dollars every month. They've done that for the last 8 years. I've literally, it's like software as a service, do nothing, right? It's a super sweet deal.
So it's a sweet deal. It's a sweet deal, Charles. But let me just
getting at. Hold on for a second. What I'm getting at is if I could give that, say, hey, where's Dave Pong? He's in there somewhere there. If I could say, hey, here's this client. This is a really good client. This is exactly what they paid me. Paid $350, and these are the intervals, right? All you have to do is take over. The odd time they'll have a support question, but once every 3 months, 2 months, they have a support question. That's about it. Can you do that for me? Would you like that client? I know he would jump on that in a heartbeat. He would say, that's a great client, right? And maybe we would work out some kind of exchange of something for it. But then the client, all I have to do is I have to literally send one piece of email that says, hi, Jennifer, such and such, we've implemented this contingency plan. If something ever happens to me, this company will assume everything. We've already gone through all the software. They're familiar with how everything works. They're ready to step in if anything was to ever happen. That makes my client feel good. That doesn't make them worry. That makes them feel more confident. Yeah. They're way more likely to jump to that. And then he just continues on as if nothing, there's like zero interruption to the client. They don't have to go out and look for things like that. I'm just saying, let's not bow down to the client and let them lead everything. Let's actually kind of guide them, right?
And you can. And I'm not saying that you cannot. I'm simply saying that there is something about a vendor-customer relationship that we are not experiencing with our buddies, And when we are pointing to someone, okay, it comes as a recommendation. And technically, when you turn the business over to someone else, of course, I think they're going to go with the flow, But it could be that the experience is not going to be what they were hoping for, In which case they will jump ship, So
they're going to jump ship if you don't do your hard job right now.
Yeah, that doesn't.
Right?
Yes, but.
That's a moot point, I think.
Yeah.
It's not because they switched, it's because you dropped the ball. If the new person comes in and has more contact, they're gonna like them more.
More contact.
Maybe they hold their hand.
Yes, they can have a better experience just as well. I'm just saying you're not involved with that person in the same type of relationship that they will be. Okay, so it's not like you can say, like, I've been first-hand customer to this guy, and I know the experience is great. That's all I'm saying. Okay, when you recommend something, from what position are you making the recommendation? Is what it boils down to me. So from there, like the other way around, I honestly, I'm coming into this business because like I said, I've been payroll like up until 2019, and I just started, and I'm pretty much betting on customers changing hands, because people will not have been planning for how things will unfold once they hit retirement, or once they get hit by a bus or whatever. Okay. But if someone was to come to me and say, hey, I have those customers, and I'm going to stop servicing them, like, am I going to pay to get those customers, or am I simply going to say, well, I'm out there, and you're going to stop serving them anyways, so I'll take my chances. So I'm sorry, what is it you were going to say?
So how about this? I have a customer that's going to put $6,000 in your pocket every year. You have to do nothing for. If you want to privately contact me and you want to purchase that customer, we can figure something out, right? It doesn't have to be you, but so, somebody Charles would go for that. I'm using that as an example. That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying that treat your stuff like we have. The fact that we have that customer it has a lot of value, and I just don't want to see people give it away. You know, you work so hard to attain the customer in the first place. And if they're on some kind of recurring revenue model, then as David said, and Henry, I think, really
for something where there's no maintenance, it's a no-brainer. There's great value there, you know. But
well, there's great value there, even if you charge by hour. Really, in fairness, that's how we all make our living anyway, mostly, right? So,
what Charles, what you're talking about really is you're abstracting the client from you. The paying and servicing of the client is abstracted from you as a person. So it has value in and of itself. And I can be transferred to your family, held by a trustee, and just hire another programmer to do the work for you in your place. You're dead, but the money goes back to your family or whatever. That's the way.
I don't know if your family really wants to manage your business.
No, they wouldn't. But what I'm saying is your family can benefit from your work, your lifetime's work, or whatever. If you've set up a system that, like your subscription system, well, why shouldn't your family still benefit from it, or at least have selling it to somebody else after your device?
If we can pass it on in some fashion.
One flaw with this, it's like making a deposit on your funeral services. When business is down, are they going to come after you? So it's like putting a contract out on yourself. You're worth more. Well, anyway, if you have a whole bunch of people ready to take over your business, I wouldn't want to walk around with all that on my head.
Well, I think everybody has picked up done work that another developer has worked on.
I think one thing that we're learning here is that there's two conversations that are happening here that are very tightly related, and that is, what is your business model and what is your continuity plan? And Charles is making a case for a certain type of business model, and I think that's valid, and I think I'd like to come back to the next sofa and have that discussion about business. But if we're just having a conversation about continuity plan, we have to understand that it depends on what the business model is. And some people don't have a family that's interested in taking over their business, and they don't have a buddy that's interested in taking over their clients. And and they may have clients that own what you've produced.
Well, it doesn't have to be about.
You also have an understanding with each of your clients, and that goes back to business model. But there's many different approaches to this continuity plan, is what I'm trying to say. And there's not necessarily a wrong choice. It's just, it has to take into account the business model. And then when you get back to the business model, sure, let's figure out better ways to run our business. And then let's update the continuity plan from there.
I like that.
Well, I'm not trying to provide a solution. I'm just giving a concept. And the concept is, you've invested something in your business. Doesn't matter if you build them by the hour, if you do whatever your method is, software as a service, whatever. You've done this work. Try to look at ways that you can monetize that down the road if something was to happen to you. So it doesn't just evaporate. That's all. If you just give the farm to everybody, here's your customer, you go find here an awesome customer that gives me money every year and gives me billable hours or whatever. Here are the keys, and I just walk away from it, then I've just done nothing. I would rather gift my leads to you guys, just if you don't buy me drinks next time, right? Sofa. Then just let them evaporate. And I think that goes with everybody. We'd rather at least see it go to somebody that we want to.
I think it's a really good point, Charles. All around, really good point. I'm going to. I think we should say, if anybody wants to get going, because it's almost 10 o'clock. Before people start really dropping out, I just want to make sure that people get properly thanked. So. Henry, thank you very much for a really interesting and clearly thought-provoking topic, and for covering it so nicely. And Robert, thanks again for introducing us again to the world of readable code and bringing that back to the fore, because there are a lot of things there that we all need to think about more. So thanks, guys, to both of you. If people want to hang around and keep talking, I'm gonna, Stefan, that is super spooky what you're doing right now. I'm going to.
Things are shutting down here. Sorry.
I'm going to leave this up and running, and people are free to hang out and talk for as long as they want. But thanks a lot for coming, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Doug.
And
Thanks,
And
Doug.
thank you, Robert and Henry.
Nicely facilitated, Doug.
Thank you.
Well done.
Everybody.
I was
I
going to
have to
say,
learn
Henry,
how.
if you give the talk again, and you have your screen go black for your camera as you give the talk, that would.
Yeah.
Are you saying that it would be better, or are you saying that was a problem?
No. I'm just saying because your when you ran the slides, it was writing up, and you were not talking over it while it was
That's because
happening.
it was karaoke. I was singing along to it.
So if you had cut the feed for your camera, then we would have all been like, oh, what happened?
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah.
Are you interested in giving that talk again, Henry, or you just don't like give it in Canada?
To quote Charles, is there any money in it?
We had we used to have a little group, and when we did talk about like selling we had one topic talked about selling a services business and that kind of thing, just to tag off what Charles was mentioning earlier. No, there's no money in it.
No. Are you thinking of another FileMaker group? Or?
Oh, I was thinking of our user group. We're always looking for interesting. I don't know, and I guess I'm not sure if everybody there would be interested in it, but it's a timely topic, right?
With COVID, you mean?
Yes. Yeah. So.
Well, no, I'm open to it.
Yeah.
Maybe we do some sort of trade or something.
Yeah,
sure.
We can do something like that. Yes.
If you want my contact info, it's pretty easy. Just henry@macwizard.ca.
Okay. But yeah, you were talking about seatbelts in U.S., right? It's similar to the mess in U.S. too, right?
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. don't want to be told what to do, right? Seatbelts, masks, etc.
What you said about seatbelts really hit me when I got to Arizona for one DevCon actually, and I saw someone on a motorcycle without a helmet.
Yikes.
I was like, boy, that is liking to live dangerously, and I'm not saying that with a helmet, if like you're like shielded from any harm, it's clearly like driving a motorcycle in itself is somewhat dangerous. You're exposed way more than you are in a car, but still, like if you take out the helmet, then I don't even want to know like what what the ending is like,
Robert, that's his insurance policy. That's his insurance policy. He doesn't want to be lying in a bed in a vegetative state. He just wants to go. If he's gonna go, he's gonna go.
Yeah, I guess that's what it is.
Yeah, well, the whole notion of Americans saying, "Don't tell us to wear a mask. We have our freedoms." That's an interesting conundrum.
It's your turn.
Those guys know nothing at all about the people that.
Oh, you're still recording, by the way.
Thanks, Mighty.